Okay, good afternoon everybody. Welcome to the Erasmus University of Rotterdam. So we're about to ask the students to enter, but I just have one notice now, and that is if you would please turn off your telephone, set it on silent, so that there's no interruption throughout the ceremony. Okay, good afternoon everybody, students, colleagues, friends, family. It's nice to see you all here at the Erasmus University, the MA graduation ceremony. So for me personally, the graduation ceremony is one of the high points of the academic year. Of course, we've seen students throughout the year struggling and researching and writing, doing very interesting projects. And then we get to read them and assess them. And then now the high point is when they graduate. So this is the moment that you, students, become professional historians, you pass your master's examination, or in Dutch, the meesterproef. So reflecting back on last year, I think that in addition to the trials and tribulations of the normal study, I think that your cohort, you faced an additional and unforeseen trouble, and that of course is COVID. Online teaching, hybrid teaching, social distancing, so that in a way that interrupted all these very important things for actually doing historical research. Talking, discussing, debating, arguing, very important to historical inquiry. Faced with these obstacles, I think you did very well in adapting to new technologies, to new teaching formats. You embraced it, you persevered, and I think in some instances you were quicker and faster in adapting than many of our colleagues in the department. And I also think that this obstacle, the fallout from COVID, brought you together as a group, as a cohort, socially. So I think that this group is quite close and quite good, and I think that your perseverance and strength of character in overcoming COVID has resulted in very good pass rates. I'm very proud to say that 93% of you passed within 1 year, and that's a full 5% higher than regular years. So I think that's worth an applause, yes. So, as for the future, of course, I'm a protagonist of learning and a lifelong learning, and I think all degrees are important. All degrees are important stepping stones towards a career. But I think that the history degree in particular is very good and very useful. And I think so for three reasons. The first is that historians, they are critical thinkers. They don't just accept, receive wisdoms, they challenge it, they criticize it. And I think this is very important. And of course, now more than ever, in a time of fake news and people and dictators using history as a justification for war, we need critical thinkers. Second, I think that historians have very well developed analytical skills. And I think this is something that sets them apart from other degrees. This is something that we focus on quite a lot at the Erasmus University. And we do it slightly different here, not just focus on historical methodology and historical skills, but in interdisciplinary degree that we invite methodologies and skills, analytical skills and tools from the outside, from other disciplines, economics, international relations theory, cultural study as well. So I think that all round, you are very good, very well endowed in the tools, the analytical tools that you have in preparation for the job. A final point, which I think sets historians apart from other degrees, is that we don't just focus on the here and now. We don't just focus on understanding the here and now, but we historicize it. So we develop this third dimension of thinking, this historical depth, which I think is very important for understanding any topic at hand. So I think that these two things, the way that you traversed these obstacles placed on your way by COVID, and the unique skills and qualifications that are endowed by a historical degree, this combination makes that you are very well positioned going forward onto the job market. And I would just comment and perhaps emphasize that, know this when you apply for jobs. This is a good and unique degree. History is important, so don't sell yourself short. Okay, so that is my introduction, and now we have an introduction from Tim Hensley.
Thank you. Bear with me, I'm quickly going to grab my notes. Hope everyone's doing well. It's an honor for me to be here today, to stand in front of you all at our master graduation. I'm happy to be here in front of both our professors, but also family and friends. Friends we have had in the past, friends we've had over the past few years, but also the new ones we've made and that we have here with us today. But most of all, of course, I would like to say congratulations to all of you sitting in here in front of me. And as Mark said, 93%, that's pretty good. So I'd quickly like to talk a bit about the start of our year, because in the first term, we studied historical analogies. And today, we might actually look back upon our bachelor graduation, or our parents might look back at their graduation and think, oh, well, this is a historical analogy. And for those who don't know and who'd like a historical lesson today, a historical analysis, and Professor Adrianson, please correct me if I'm wrong, is in a way the claim that history repeats itself. More or less. Paraphrased. And it's used by policymakers. And in the US, for example, they compared 9/11 to Pearl Harbor. And in that way, historical analogies are used by politicians, and we might be best to use them later on. But also looking back at the first assignment from you, Professor Adrianson, they asked us to look back home and look at a historical landmark or historical place back home. And for me, that was the monumental Palace of Justice in Brussels. But let's look at our place where we are today, because we shouldn't forget Erasmus University, Rotterdam. Look back at the library, where we spent so many hours finalizing our thesis, but also chatting with each other when not working on our thesis. And the G building, which was so hard to find, but where we, in our very much needed breaks, actually got to know each other even more, because we obviously didn't get to do that when we were all online. And let's not forget the Smitsa, where after long days of class, studying and writing, we all grabbed a drink together and got to know each other even better. And besides history, I think we should also mention international relations, because that's also one of the last classes that we had all together this year. And in that class, we actually separated into realists, constructivists, liberalists, and many other international relation theorists. And in that term, we also separated in various thesis circles, in our thesis topics. And these workshops eventually allowed us to create a beautiful thesis. And I'd like to mention a few, and I would love to mention all of them, but a few which I got because we have such various disciplines in history. I was just talking to Peter, and his sister's like, oh yeah, you're a historian, right? So you must like ancient Egypt. Well, all of us go into different disciplines, and some of our theses, they focused on countries and individuals from those countries, like Cuba and India and France, but others looked at Dutch colonialism or women's rights. We looked at maybe American humanitarianism in Iraq, the port of Rotterdam specifically, and also historical video games, which I looked into myself. And what's really interesting is that all of these various critical perspectives that we built in these thesis workshops, but also in the various courses we had, will allow us to kind of keep going, just as Mark said. And some of us might continue studies. Some of us might end up working for government institutions or in a private organization. And some might end up going in the academics themselves as well, which is beautiful each way. And besides studying and writing about history, we've also been living history. We obviously have lived through COVID, and we had some lovely times online and hybrid, and we saw what worked and what didn't work. We've lived through a war, which has even been translated through directly in thesis topics. And, you know, politics, I mean, I don't even want to get started on the recent changes in Europe. And not to forget climate change, because climate change, right, it makes us realize that even now we need to make more of an impact than we ever did before. But don't forget that each of these current events have history. Each of them have meaning. When you look at epidemics and pandemics, they've happened across the globe throughout history. You look at the Antonine Plague, brought back by Roman soldiers, which eventually ravaged the Roman Empire. You can look at the Black Death in the 14th century, which ravaged across 3 separate continents and maybe even killed up to 200 million people. And when you look at the war, every war has its own history. And we will only get to see later on who will write the history of that war. And for climate change, we actually learned from Mark that environmentalism has actually been around since the 1850s. But since then, has had its ups and downs in regards to public support. And finally, with politics, I mean, you can already see how much international relations, but both economic history also play a major role in the modern politics that we see today. Speaking of history, history is all around us. And there's always a classic question that you get asked. What is my child, my grandchild, my sibling, my friend going to do with a history degree? Well, in today's world, each and every one of us has a job to try and create a better tomorrow. Our university has solidified in its values and vision that all students will actually work towards a better tomorrow and that they will make an impact. And as Maya Angelou said, history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. And who is better qualified than us? We who know what we did wrong yesterday, a year ago, and 100 years ago, to make an impact tomorrow. So, for those who are still unsure about what the future holds, and those who are just uncertain in general, I'd like to leave you with an anecdote, a historical one, mind you. Imagine this: Gaius Julius Caesar crying while looking at a statue of Alexander the Great, or I had to cross-reference and check, he might have actually just been reading about Alexander the Great. And when he was asked why he was crying, he replied, well, when Alexander the Great was my age, he'd already done so many great deeds, and he was king of so many peoples. And here I am, and I have not succeeded at anything. Well, it's not the Julius Caesar that we know today. He was 33 at the time, and no, he hadn't achieved anything just yet. But the one we know today eventually became one of the most powerful political figures in the Roman Republic, and became the Caesar that we know today. So, what I want to tell you then is look at the opportunities that lay ahead of you. And all of you have yet time to achieve them, instead of focusing on what we haven't done just yet. So, we are young, we are continuously learning, and we have all of tomorrow to make an impact. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that speech, Tim. Spoken like a true historian, I might add. So for the next part, we'll be handing you your degrees, and I'll just have a quick note on the procedure. So what we will do is we will invite you forward. So you've all been supervised by a supervisor. All those of the same supervisor will be invited forward. Then we will have a brief introduction based on a quote, a citation offered by your supervisor. We will hand you your degree, and then we'll move over here to have a picture taken with the degree. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to ask, sorry, where are we? Yeah, Fien Post forward, please. Okay, Fien, thank you very much. So, of course, you've been supervised by Dr. Ben Rips, and he mentioned that you actually postponed submitting your thesis for a year because you took up a wonderful internship, a very valid reason for postponing submission. And the quote that he gave us is this, encapsulating your process from A to Z, from female entrepreneurship in fashion to fashion forecasting and, finally, decolonizing fashion education, all very fashionable topics. So I'd like to... I would like to ask Theo and Annette to come forward, please. So, you might stand up. So, Theo, thank you very much. You wrote your topic with Dick Dowers, and as you know, Dick Dowers, one of our chairholder professors here in the department, retired just last year. He wanted to come, but he's at the moment on research in Morocco. So he asked me to convey this citation for you, originating from Cyprus, close to the area of his research, Syria, and studying its highly militant Islamist fashions. Theo demonstrated a very keen interest in the mechanisms of Islamist rhetoric and offered a sound analysis of the language of Islamist violence. Well done. Congratulations. Annette, so also a student of Dick Dowers. On your research, Dick wrote that battling the effects of corona and the pressures from work, you produced an exceptional, well-documented, and very well-written and most relevant analysis of feminist online activism in no less than 3 countries in the Middle East. Congratulations. So I would like to ask Noah to come forward, please, and Els is going to hand you the degree.
This is not you. There you are. Well, dear Noah, you followed an extraordinary path to completing your master degree in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, you know what I mean. Your driving force is your fascination for the current and future developments of the port of Rotterdam. However, you chose to study history. Therefore, you had to look to historical developments as well. You showed that you possess the mindset to connect past, present, and future. You combined your thesis research on the transition of coal to oil with an extended internship at the Rotterdam Port Authority, where you helped drafting scenarios for long-term developments in port activities till 2050, of which the necessary transition to renewable energy will be an important element. This already great endeavor you then combined also with participation in the Maritime Honours Program of the History Department and the Maritime Museum in Rotterdam. And together with your fellow students, Elaine van den Burg and Paul Klaassen, you took interviews from a large number of dock workers about their daily life and work. You recorded untold stories about companionship, how to make hard work light, and about family life. You helped capturing past and present harbor culture for future generations. The interviews are part of the Maritime Museum collection now. Well, with a track record like this, it was no surprise that before you even completed your thesis, you were invited to join Smartport, where it is now your job to, as they say, develop the knowledge for tomorrow challenges. Dear Noah, it's my honor to present your MA diploma today, a special person who followed a special track and is facing a special future. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Noah. Hein, and could I ask Peter, please, to come forward?
Dear Peter, everybody told me to be very short and brief, and so I could be ready by simply saying bravo. But let me say something more for the audience. This is the second time in 2 years that you have been awarded cum laude, and the second time that I have submitted your thesis for a National Thesis Award. A very nice result for a boy who started out as a VMBO secondary education student. You came second in the Script Thesis Award for your bachelor thesis, and I'm sure you will score very high with your MA thesis, Outsourcing Security at Sea, on how warfare at sea by privateers, private ship owners that fight at the part of a war to make a living from looting, disappeared in the 19th century, but in the last few decades, private maritime security companies reappeared and took over the protection of shipping against modern pirates. I cannot dwell on this for too long, but I can assure that you have written a beautiful thesis. Your forte is not only being active and reading everything about your topic, but also listening to the remarks others make about your work and taking and use them in your further work. That you are a very special student is also apparent from the quote from an email to me. In the meantime, it might also be nice to report that today I also published an article on a well-known blog for a European China expert and interesting parties. This time about the oft-cited comparison between China and Imperial Germany. In 40 years of higher education, I have never had a student that published articles like this and wrote about it in such a way. I am proud of you, although I have to admit that there is hardly any reason for it, for such students as you could do it all alone. You are now studying in Paris, but I'm convinced that the academic world, also in the Netherlands, will hear a lot of you.
Thank you, Peter, and congratulations. So perhaps I could ask Kaylee to come up, and Kees.
Okay. Well, it's a great honor to have you here, Kaylee. Most of all, because it's the first time I think that we see each other live. Until now, we happen to be known each other only through screens, which nevertheless was a very entertaining and encouraging experience, I hope, for both sides of the connection. I'm very proud of what you did. Kaylee wrote a beautiful thesis on the portrayal of Japanese characters in British World War II comics. And it may sound perhaps like a rather narrow topic, but I think it learns you quite a lot about the importance of visual stereotypes, national stereotypes, and how these things continue to live after a relatively short period of just the 5 wartime years. So once again, congratulations for writing and finishing the thesis. I'm also very happy about the way in which you worked. You're not only very energetic and very enthusiastic, but you're also very open-minded about all kinds of comments and criticisms and other things that you receive. So it was a great pleasure working with you, and I very much hope that you are looking towards a very bright future, either within or without the field of history. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Kaylee. So Lara, may I ask you to come forward? Anushka, Nikki, and Rowdy.
Okay, it's wonderful to see all three of you here today. As some of my colleagues have said, it's lovely to see you in person as well, having met you mostly online over the past sort of 6 months or so as you were finishing your thesis. So, Anushka, first on my list. So when you started out in your process, you were kind of looking for some really exciting ideas. You were exploring some really big themes, really big questions, and you really tackled them with strength and confidence. And yeah, when you submitted your thesis, these are what I was thinking. It takes a bold researcher to undertake to deconstruct the assumptions underpinning academic knowledge. And Anushka took on that challenge and gave us really important new insights. Congratulations. And now on to Nikki. Again, just like Anushka, tackling a topic that was so expansive and so deep and coming up with some really interesting new ways of expressing how to even make an argument within a field was so impressive, and you tackled it with such organization and such thoroughness. It was a wonderful piece of research to supervise. And reading your work, I realized it shows us that something we might view positively has deeper roots. And your critical social research will really help us to reevaluate society for the better. Congratulations. And last but not least, Rowdy. So when you started out on your thesis, you told me that you wanted to take the work of Mearsheimer. So for anyone who doesn't know, this is someone we might say is quite a big cheese in the field of international relations. And you wanted to take these ideas and you wanted to contest them and to find alternative ways of looking at the world. And I would say that in a fight, I'd back you, Rowdy. So I think that, you know, you've come out and you've shown us that there are so many different ways of looking at international relations, and you came up with a really convincing takedown of Mearsheimer, so well done. Your intellectual creativity and wide-ranging knowledge show us why every theoretical problem needs an update sooner or later. Well done.
Reza. So, dear Reza, of course, you were supervised by Dr. Maarten van Dijk, who's teaching at the moment, very important. But he asked me to do the honors. And of course, we know each other a bit as well. One of the few students who actually became a lecturer in the history department before graduating. That's how much we are impressed by Reza. So Maarten conveyed the following, that you told him at the beginning of the trajectory that you wanted to make a real impact on society with your thesis, and that you wanted to do this in Rotterdam, which you liked very much. And I think this is very much in line with the values that we hold at the Erasmus department. So well done and congratulations. Sander, Ralf, and Silke, please. So, starting with you, Sander. One of my own students, and actually a very lucky supervision this was, because you came into the research workshop with a very clear idea of what you wanted to do, a very clear idea of the sources that you wanted to use, and a very good approach to studying. You were always ahead of the game until, I must mention the last week, when there was a bit of stress that you couldn't find a key piece of evidence, but you persevered, and you found it, and writing up the thesis with flying colors. Well done. So, Ralf, welcome. Of course, not my supervisee, that was Dr. Mano de Lea, who is now at the University of Amsterdam, and he asked me to hand you your degree. So your topic was very fascinating. It was an early modern topic that in the history department we did not have very much expertise in. And in a way, your topic forced us to expand the expertise we had, which is fascinating, looking at the orders of St. John and trying to argue how that could be viewed in terms of the state. A very successful argument you made with peaks and troughs, but successfully concluded. Well done. Okay, Silke, so what are my supervisees? And in your case, I think the supervisory process was slightly different. For me, it was easy, but for you, it was more difficult. When you came into the research workshop, I saw somebody with a very clear mind and a very clear idea about what they wanted to do, but there was these obstacles that you encountered, which I did not see as a problem, but you did. But you persevered and you worked your way over these and concluded a very, very nice thesis on a topic which is very good, environmentalism and how that affects security. So, congratulations. Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to have a small intermezzo, and Artemi is going to give us a speech.
May I use my notes? Yeah, sure thing. So, good afternoon. Thank you for coming here, and I'm really honored to be here, to see you all here. Well, most of you, as it was mentioned, 93% of the students have graduated successfully. And yeah, I was thinking for quite a long time what to say here, because I definitely had something to say, but I've been thinking for a significantly long time what to. The thing, this year has brought me so many new experience, at some point so drastic and so dramatic experience that I was deep flooded into it. And that experience was definitely, at one hand it was positive, at one hand it was really challenging. But today I wanted to say a couple of things about the field of study that unites us, most of people who are sitting here, the history itself. And I would like to say a couple of things about the very, I would say, challenging thing for the modern world that we are facing it today and now. I assume that we all have, well, broad but somewhat common conception of the history, what the history is. It is, well, a study of the past. For somebody, history could be their great-grandfather's old watches. For somebody, that could be a battle during the 30 Years' War. For somebody, history could be something intangible, like writings or songs, etc. Unfortunately, in the era of nationalism, history has also become one of the most devastating weapons that we, humanity, know, that produces a lot of dramatic consequences that will be dealt with by the further generations. History is a weapon of a very considerable power, and the misuse of history is unraveling on our eyes in front of us. While Russia intentionally reinvents the whole history and the whole matter of history. Timothy Snyder, our fellow historian from the United States, calls this process the phenomenon, the politics of eternity, when the history basically disappears and is substituted by the eternal process that is being weaved in the interests of some parties. The selective use of history, the approaches that is being used by some of the regimes, including the Russian one, are at the core of justifying some of the dramatic, some of the toughest wars that the European continent has seen in well, at least in a century. My excuses. This alarming example, unfortunately, is the only one. It's not the only one. As historians, our hard yet very crucial, and I would say key thing, is to keep the history going, not to subvert it into this eternity that, well, has no beginning and no end, but to define that, to keep the history going, and history shouldn't be invented or made up. It is as essential as we human beings, it is as essential as the world around us. Hence, I would say that the disruption of something essential, what flows open force, is bringing some drastic consequences. So as a fellow historian, I would love to ask you to keep going, to keep on researching, to keep on dreaming, and please do not subverge to the things that are being done by those in their interests. Thank you ever so much for your attention, and thanks for Erasmus University Rotterdam for having me here. Thanks for my supervisor, thanks for all the professors that have been with us here. And yes, thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Artemi. Very timely critical notes on of course, the current state of affairs and the roles that we play as historians. So perhaps I may invite Tim, Tom, and Denise forwards.
Let's see. Yes, let's start with Tim. Well, Tim, first of all, I would like to say to the audience, when Tim entered my class last year, he decided to study the one topic that really matters, which is historical video games, and nobody is going to change our minds on that. Yes. Okay, but so Tim chose that topic and he came into my class and my supervision. And gradually throughout the year, we developed an idea where Tim looked into online communities and what they do when they play historical games, the sort of historical understandings that circulate there. So some of the things that came out of it was, well, all sorts of fictional characters that people come up with. It's kind of compelling, so very much invite you to look into it if you'd be interested. So Tim, I very much want to congratulate you on that. I also hope that, and I'm convinced that the quote that I put here, that you can bring that into practice. I think that's very much the case. I also want to highlight some other thing that really struck me about Tim. During the master thesis conference, Tim had to present his thesis research, and there, like he did today just now, Tim also demonstrated the creativity and the skill that he has with presenting. So in that sense, I would say, Tim, very well deserved. Congratulations with your MA thesis. Nice picture also. Dear Tom, well, so when Tom entered my class at the start of the year, Tom said to me, Peter, I want to study how the Cuban government over-legitimizes itself. And so I said to Tom, okay, hold on a little bit. You already have your conclusion. Let's go a little bit slow. And so during the first class, one of the things that I highlighted was, important rule, people, 99% of what you think you know is wrong. This is something that I think is important. And I also remembered that Tom then immediately asked me, Peter, are you referencing me here? And so, well, I said, not really. Was in general, but could have applied. But I would even say I was wrong. 99% of what I thought was wrong. Because Tom was actually absolutely right about his conclusions about the Cuban state and what it does. I think Tom has written a wonderful thesis about how the Cuban state uses its newspaper to legitimize its power. And well, Tom, I hope that the quote that you have here, how the Cuban Revolution fares, interests me mainly because of my daughter, who is present here, I'm guessing. Hello. As she can hopefully return to her birth country. I very much hope that's the case, and I think that you can certainly also contribute to it, perhaps, with what you've achieved. I would say congratulations with your tremendous work, Tom. And then last, but certainly not least, for my cohort of 3 people, Denise Schröder. Denise, I chose a small quote here from your thesis. Waarom is de Tweede Wereldoorlog zoveel jaar na dato nog zo belangrijk? But it tells you a bit short, I think. Over the past couple of years, what you've done is, just as a bit of context in terms of topic, Denise has interviewed children and grandchildren of former members of the Dutch SS, which is a very sensitive topic, of course, but also a very significant and compelling one. What came out of the thesis is incredibly interesting and important, I think, what children and grandchildren feel in terms of assignment that I have for society. So purely based on what you've achieved, Denise, I cannot congratulate you enough, I think. But I would also want to end with what I wrote in my evaluation, which was, and I'm quoting here from the top of my head, kinda. It was a wonderful experience for me to supervise Denise. For me, she is an example for any student. So, Denise, congratulations with your wonderful achievement.
Okay, so can I have asked Alexander to come forward, please? So, Alexander, of course you are supervised, not by myself, by Professor Ralf Futselaar. He's asked me to do the honors because he's not here, but perhaps that's good because he will ramble on for about half an hour about whatever. of course, we do know each other. You were in my research work group, and I think that from all the students that we had, your research looking at intelligent networks in the Netherlands in World War II was actually the most historical. It was the most historical research of the cohort, I think, because you actually went into the archives. How old-fashioned of you. But you went into the archives and you produced a very interesting, fascinating piece of work. Congratulations on that. John, and could I ask Robin and Artemi to come forward, please?
So, well, Robin and Artemi, I mean, I supervise you both, but I assume you haven't really met each other. Well, the reason for that is that... The reason for that is that Robin actually started 2 years ago. She wasn't late in any way, but she congratulated also with an honors degree, which well, is basically an extension of the project. And well, we've heard some words about COVID, and I assume you all feel that you were hit quite hard by COVID in your studies, but I can tell you, you weren't hit as hard as last year's cohort, because if you see what Robin had to endure with well, the lockdowns, the archives all went, well, they all closed. Being from South Africa, eventually you returned to South Africa, fleeing basically from a COVID epidemic here, only to be encountered with the South African variant over there. So it was back and forth, and within all that mess, it really astounded me how you were able to, well, keep working very diligently and concentrated, even though you might not have experienced it in that way yourself. At least that was how it came across. Your project on the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Committee in South Africa, was very interesting. It was a topic, basically, the TRC, that we all know, lots of historiography written on it, but the take you took on this topic, focusing specifically on the women's hearings and being interested in how the past basically haunts the present, you were able to add a new layer, a new dimension of interpretation to a topic that we all know. The way in which you did was excellent, so excellent that I am now not only able to give you your diploma, but also with a cum laude, which means that the GPA of your entire studies was at least 8.25, which is an extreme honors, and it's well, my pleasure to hand it to you. Artemi, well, you weren't very specific in the talk that you just gave, but I think that we all know what was underneath it. You're from Russia yourself. When you started writing your thesis, you wanted to know basically how, well, Russian history was used by Russian politicians. And it's, well, initially it seemed to become a rather dull project because, well, back at the end of last year, Russian politicians didn't really speak up explicitly about it, whereas in their actions, they banned all kinds of historical interest groups, etc., but they were very politically correct in their speeches. So we thought, well, perhaps it would be best to look at their actions and analyze law, Russian law, how it basically bans and promotes certain forms of history. You wrote an entire research proposal based on that idea, and then in February, basically the entire research proposal went out the window because a war broke out that made it very necessary for you to basically update the scope. This meant that your topic was very, very topical and absolutely relevant. And it was also a challenge for you, being from Russia and, well, not, let's say, the most pro-Z or pro-Putin Russian around, to kind of engage in that, a very emotional process. But in the end, you succeeded in that and delivered a thesis that provided us with a lot of insights into the current conflict and beyond. Artemi, congratulations.
Congratulations, Artemi. And perhaps I may ask Luc, Richard, and Ishan to step forward. Okay, Luc, starting with you, of course, supervised by my colleague, Dr. Sandra Manikam, but in our research workshop, so we got to know each other. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So yes, in our research workshop, we got to know each other quite well over the time. A difficult topic you opted to study, which brought some travails along the way, but nothing that you could not cope with. And from our perspective, the supervisors, there was no doubt that you would pass, but there were some stressful moments on your part. But all's well that ends well. Well done and congratulations. So, Richard, of course, you were one of my colleague Sarah's students. And each student is different, of course. And for you, your topic was difficult, but you got off to a flying start. In fact, you did this, I think, part-time in addition to your philosophy degree as well. And I think you got off to a flying start. And from that point onwards, you just kept going. It was an easy ride, at least from the supervisory perspective. I'm glad that we paired you up with Sarah, our IR theorist, which was a challenge, which I hope you enjoyed. But congratulations on the degree. Ishan. So, also in the research workshop that I convened together with Sarah, supervised by Sarah, and when you entered, we already noticed quite immediately that you had a very keen mind, very clear mind, and an exceptional ability to put complex thoughts into words very easily. Perhaps in your case, that led to a bit of laid-back attitude towards the thesis. We never doubted that it would come together towards the end, but it did come together towards the end, the very end, I should add. Yeah. Congratulations. So, may I ask forwards Eva and Nick, please, and then Jori.
So good to see you guys, also face to face. I want to say congratulations to you especially, but also to all of you, of course, seen in some other courses, especially because, as I perhaps a bit too brazenly during the bachelor graduation said, look at how many didn't make it this year. It really is an accomplishment that you guys made it. Unfortunately, I only have time for a single anecdote for each student, but I will try to fill it as good as I can. Eva, I think the best thing that I can tell about you is that at a certain stage, we were worried about the grade that you wanted to receive and that we wanted to award you. And I sent you one of the most detailed how to improve your thesis things, saying, look, for this grade, do this, 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 and that. For this grade, do that, that, and that. I think it ended up being 2 or 3 pages, a mini article. And Eva then went, nah, let's not do it. Which actually makes you only the second student who ever did that to me, which caused a bit of an existential crisis, both for me and the secondary supervisor, Dick Dowers, because we were looking at each other and we thought, well, this is a really good thesis, But normally in such a stage, you kind of have this feeling, well, we want to punish you. You didn't do what we want to do. And in the end, Dick and I spent a long time discussing with each other and saying, well, actually we think it is good enough to deserve that grade, even though you ignore that, which still makes us reflect as in how far should we now give feedback to future theses if students say, and they are able to get away with it. But I also think it says something about your thesis, which, to end with a slightly critical note, was still too bloody long. Was it 10,000 or 20,000 words over? Almost a PhD thesis. Nick, I was thinking about all the excellent things I wanted to say about your thesis, which I really, really enjoyed, both because it was so close on my own research field, because it was so good. And then I thought I should actually give a slightly critical note towards myself. And I think I owe you an apology, because I had so many students during the summer that struggled, so many students that required extra care. And as I was trying to do that, I think you kind of slipped through my fingers, and your thesis just continued on and on. I was like, okay, this will be fine. I don't need to be on top of it. And then when it actually came, it was so excellent, it was so good, that I think if I had been just a step more on top of yours, it would have been even more excellent. So it was really good, and I really mean what I say there. Your thesis is something that should be required reading for a lot of UK diplomats if they ever want to regain the status that they once had in the international system. So congratulations.
Okay, Ronald. Indeed, that deserves an applause. I think you know a lot of people here, Ronald. Yeah. Supervised by Professor Dr. Gijsbert Oak. I'm doing the honours. And perhaps I can say a few words, of course, because you're not unfamiliar to us here in the History Department. At some stage, you've been a colleague, worked with Marlinde for a bit, and you've also been around for quite a bit, I think quite some time. So you've got to know us over the meantime. And I think that's the biggest compliment that you deserve, is that you graduated with an excellent project this year on time. Well done. Okay, so that concludes the ceremonial part of the graduation ceremony. And so perhaps as a final word, I could once more just congratulate all of the students on this wonderful performance. Having graduated, well done. Okay, so for the next part, don't run off just yet. So there's two more things to do. So when we go outside, first, there's a photograph for the entire cohort of students. So that is up first. And then second, we've got some drinks. So please do stay around for a drink and a chat. Thank you very much.